candle of peace. Most of us, when we think of peace, do think of an absence of conflict. That can be internal. We can have conflicts within ourselves. We can have conflicts with our neighbors. We can have conflicts between nations. And no matter where we are, we may see ourselves, and when we think about peace, we think about the absence of conflict. But I would like to suggest today that we're going to look at peace, and there are steps that we can take to experience peace in our lives. And the kinds of conflict that we may have, we'll start with personal peace. And there it is, personal peace, and you can put up the answer. There's some things we can do for personal peace. The first one is, don't compare. What often happens is we look at somebody else's life and say, well, I want that. How come they got it? And what happens? Now you have an internal conflict or something that's going on in you. The scriptures made it pretty clear when God said in the commandments in Exodus 20, do not covet what your neighbor has. Well, that wasn't just a command. It was, if you want to have personal peace, don't compare yourself to other people. Live your life. We're all on a separate journey. There's no two of us that have experienced the same things in life. And so as we look into the future, we'll have more personal peace if we don't get into the business of comparing. The second thing we don't want to do is be negative. In fact, I call it avoid negativity. The illustration I've used over the years is there are some people who see the Swiss cheese. Some people only see the holes, and some people only see the cheese. The people who are living in a world of negativity only see the holes. They see what's not there. How come it didn't go all the way to the end of the block? Well, because it's Swiss cheese. It's supposed to be different. And if we allow ourselves to see the cheese instead of the holes in the cheese, guess what? We can see far more. We have far more than we realize if we're not looking at the holes in the Swiss cheese. One of the best ways to avoid negativity is to use gratitude. When I'm feeling negativity building up in my life, the thing I need to do is to look around and start asking myself, what do I have? What have I been able to experience? What are the gifts that I've received? And when I have great gratitude in my heart, then it's a lot harder to be negative. I've got so many things, like I said this morning, we have the negativity of the temperature is 32. But there are people who are living that have 40-degree less temperature and a whole bunch of snow to pile through. So it makes me happy that I live in Las Vegas. I don't ever regret that this time of year. Second kind of peace that we can is peace with others. And there's two things we can do on that one as well. Now, the first one is to smile. And granted, in the world of COVID and masks, it's hard to see a smile. But I have to tell you, eyes change when we are smiling. I love the commercial that's on TV right now where the guy's wearing a green jersey and he's going to buy some beer at a convenience store, and he walks up to the counter and there's this big guy who's standing there in a maroon shirt that's the other team, and he gives him a frown and he puts a cap in front of him. You got to buy this. And the guy looks terrified. And then what does the guy behind the counter do? He smiles. And the tension in the room dissipates. Of course, then that guy leaves and a woman shows up in her green jersey, and then she gets the same treatment. But what a great example of what smiling does. It disarms. If people are having the experience of being sad and we show up with a smile, it's a way that we can lift their spirits. And we have the opportunity to contribute to their happiness by offering them a smile. A second thing that we can do is to be kind. Costs us nothing. I was very heartened to see many of you bringing your gifts in for the senior tree today. That's kindness in action. That's you making somebody else's life a little bit better. And by you bringing in the gift that LSN is going to give to the folks who are going to be the recipients, that there's a sense of joy that you are passing on. Kindness is a way of having peace with others. I had a neighbor growing up who was a crank. And as a little kid, I was terrified that if my ball flew into his yard, we had to sneak into his yard because he'd come running out and, get off my yard. It was hard to be kind to him. But my parents were real good about saying, now treat him nicely, and if the ball goes into his yard, then beg for forgiveness before he shoots you, or whatever. I mean, he had his own little temperament issues. But the part that eventually got interesting, I got older and bigger, and then he got smaller, in my opinion, and he became kinder. And as it turned out, I ended up mowing his lawn for him when he got hurt, and suddenly that kindness of mowing his yard, he became a completely different person to me. And I saw him for what he was. He wasn't just a crank. He was someone who also could distribute kindness. For him, it was more random. But the point is, he got the message. Be kind. There's a third kind of peace that we can look for, and that's peace with the past. There's a couple things we can do with this as well. One of the ways to have peace with the past is to live in the present. It's so easy to keep rehashing what we did wrong or rehashing things that we did. Last week was a fabulous experience for me. I've only been in this church for 8 weeks, 10 weeks. But for those of you who have been here for 30 years, it was so fun to be able to look back and remember all of the different phases of growth and change that have taken place in this congregation. And one of the ways to be at peace with the past is to live in the present. Don't live with regrets. Don't live constantly recycling what I should have done, what I could have done. No. You did what you did. It's over. It's done. And now I'm living in the present. And living in the present gives us the opportunity to move ahead. Because then we can start planning the future. And that's really the process that this congregation is in. Last week and this fall, we've been celebrating the past. But now it's time to live in the present, and where are we going to go in the future? That's true for individuals, it's true for us as a congregation, it's true for organizations, it's true for countries. There's no limit to this. I think the value of living in the present is learning to enjoy the day. The sun is shining. The world around us is beautiful. Enjoy it. Don't take a day for granted. And the more I find myself, we have a dog that I have to walk every morning. I don't have to. I could make my wife do it, but I'm trying to practice kindness. So I get up and I'm the one that puts him on a leash, and we take our mile walk in the morning. And I have to tell you that when I'm doing those walks, I'm sometimes outlining sermons that are coming up for the next week, and sometimes I'm planning of what's going to happen next in certain circumstances and situations. But as I'm walking around this time of year, I am so grateful that I'm wearing a jacket, not overalls and a mittens and a fur hat. The beauty of what we're doing when we live in the present is to look for the things we can enjoy now and then plan for those things we can look forward to. In our announcement sections at the end of the service, we have the things we can look forward to. And there are a bunch of things coming. So Jesus said this, let's read it together. I have told you these things that you may have peace. Jesus is speaking. And I've told you these things this morning because Jesus and I are on the same team today. I think we're on the same team every day, but I'm hoping that I want you to experience personal peace. I want you to experience the kind of peace that is beyond understanding. And the things that we've talked about so far today are all intended to help you take steps toward peace. Peace of mind, peace of heart, peace of relationships. But there's another piece that I want you to, this is a P-I-E-C-E, that I'd like you to think about. Most of you have never heard of a guy by the name of Reinhold Niebuhr. He was born in the 1890s in Missouri. He went to Elmhurst College in Illinois. He went to Eden Seminary in St. Louis, Missouri. He went to some grad classes at Yale Divinity School. And he became a theologian and a professor at Union Seminary in New York City, and he taught there for 30 years. You wouldn't have any reason to know Reinhold Niebuhr, but you'll be shocked to know that one of the things that he created in a sermon in the 1930s, he wrote a prayer. And that prayer morphed into what we're going to read today. It's called the Serenity Prayer. Reinhold Niebuhr was the one who wrote the outline to this that morphed into the Serenity Prayer that's known by millions of folks in recovery groups around the world. But the serenity here is also the word peace. So I think this is one of the most perfect prayers for peace that we can utter on a regular basis. And I really want to encourage you to think about it, to pray about it, to use the prayer whenever you have the opportunity, or when you feel discouraged, or you start comparing, or you start doing the things. You know what? What Reinhold Niebuhr captured in this prayer is simple enough. Let's read it together. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. What a powerful prayer. Lord, grant me the peace of knowing the things that I cannot change, the things I can change, and the courage to make those changes, and the wisdom to know the difference. The peace of God, which passes all human understanding, we can take steps toward if we follow the things we talked about today. Thanks be to God.